And welcome to this Wednesday edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForest. Very happy to have you guys with us once again. Although you might be singing that Rolling Stones tune because I think I'm on a losing streak. We were talking about it a little bit yesterday. How do you break it? I mean, you just bet $2 to show on a 1-9 shot just to cash a ticket. Yesterday was an example of something that we've often talked about here on the program, how you can be pristine in your logic and have everything mapped out and doped out so that you have put yourself in a situation where you cannot lose. Everything that you thought about a certain game, any sporting event, turns out to be correct, and yet you end up getting hammered, punched right in the face. There's a big right hand, as if you ran into a right from Vladimir Klitschko. And that's what happened to us last night. We're going to get into the anatomy of a loss on the program here right at the top. We gave out a game yesterday that wasn't exactly with some deep-rooted conviction. It just seemed like the right idea. And maybe it would lead to a philosophical change in the way you approach betting baseball, if you are betting baseball. Because back in the day, you would look at the pitching matchups and you would assume, is Whitey Ford going to go the distance in this ball game? In all likelihood, even if it goes extra innings, he's still going to be out there on the mound. Bob Gibson, Juan Marichal, some of these old school guys, they weren't lifting him in the fifth inning or sixth inning of a ball game. And yet that is far from the MO that you have in play today in Major League Baseball. And so it's become more common, I think, if you are going to make some kind of analysis on a ball game to quantify it and say that you're only making this wager good through the first five innings. Now, maybe we should have thought about that and rethought our position yesterday before we said, hey, the Philadelphia Phillies had just clinched the National League East. They're on the road. They're pitching one of their top guys. But at the same time, I think it was Sanchez was on the mound for the Philadelphia Phillies. And this was a guy who had performed very, very well for them. I don't know that he was second to Wheeler, who's been out of the lineup, but was a very competent starter. And he's going against Shohei Ohtani, who, as we mentioned, after a sluggish start in his comeback, now he wasn't pitching a lot of innings. There was no great demand on him to go very far into ball games. But after a sluggish start, coming back off this Tommy John recuperation period, he was really starting to look like his old self. And we thought his last few starts were very, very impressive. Impressive enough to go ahead and say, if you're getting virtually even money, I think you had to lay 102 to win 100 on the Dodgers. And we thought, with the Phillies still maybe in celebration mode, they know they're going to get a bye in the first round of the baseball playoffs when they come up in a couple of weeks. And the Dodgers in a dogfight with the San Diego Padres, who were on the road and ended up losing to the New York Mets last night. All the incentive, and that score was already in the books. The Padres and the Mets, that was taking place, I believe, at Citi Field. So the Dodgers would have been aware that the Padres had lost, and they had a chance to open up three on the San Diego Padres in their race in the National League West, which has been kind of seesawing for a while here between 1 and 2 games differential. The Padres even caught the Dodgers at one point. So with Ohtani on the mound, and all the incentive in the world for the L.A. Dodgers, they're at home. You're only laying 102 to win 100, so very favorable in terms of any wager you would make on the Dodgers and any time Ohtani's even on the field. And sure enough, Philadelphia is down 4-0 after 5 innings to the Los Angeles Dodgers. Ohtani has a goose egg in not only the run column, but he's pitching a no-hitter. All right, so you know they're not going to let him go the distance in this ball game, and the fact that he even went 5 was somewhat surprising. But no hits on the board for the Philadelphia Phillies. They're down 4-0 after 5 innings. If you had gone ahead and quantified that bet a little bit and said, I'm only betting the first 5, you're a winner. But what happened after that? The Dodgers go to the bullpen and replacing Ohtani. He stayed in the game as the designated hitter, I guess, he was already in the batting order, so he kept his spot in the batting order. And the Dodgers bring in Justin Hrabowski, not Al Hrabowski, the mad Hungarian, but Justin Hrabowski, who promptly turns around in the 6th inning and coughs up 5 runs that were charged to him, and the Phillies go on to tally 6 in that frame. They're now up 6-4. And you're thinking all that brilliant logic about the incentive and who's got the motivation in this game and the fact that Ohtani was starting to look sharper and sharper with each ensuing start. All of that brilliant logic that you would apply to making your wager and the fact that you were getting a very good price, all of a sudden, whoosh, a vanishing act, man, goes right up in smoke, evaporates into thin air, and you're down 6-4. So you get that call from the governor. I don't know. I was a big fan of these Carol Chessman movies many, many years ago. That's like many, many years ago because they used to be part of a thing called Rain Out Theater in New York, where a game would go into a rain delay, and instead of going to Sports Center or whatever, they would play some real old black and white movie. One of which was the Carol Chessman story. This was a guy who went to the gas chamber 8 times, and I don't know if they finally ever fried the guy, but he was in California, and they had the gas chamber as their means of execution. And the story went that every time they threw Chessman into the gas chamber, they would drop the pellets. And then at the very last second, this call would come on the phone there as the governor was standing by or the warden. And you would hear this cry, "Hey, Whitey, get him out of there." And he would have gotten a reprieve from the governor. The governor was obviously on the other end of the phone, and the warden was taking the call. And they would pull this guy out at the last second. And I always got a big kick out of that, in spite of the fact, I don't know. Like I said, what Carol Chessman ultimately did, I don't remember, or whether or not they finally did put him, under the influence of enough gas that he checked out. But you always like to get a reprieve, and so we did in this game last night. Our money's still riding on the Dodgers, down 6-4. Eighth inning pops up, and we get a reprieve. Otani hits a home run, and the Dodgers rally for two. It's now 6-6, and you're thinking, all right, we're in pretty good shape here. We got the last at bats. We're going to get last licks. And the Philadelphia Phillies have now blown this 2-run lead late in the ball game in the eighth inning. And what happens? The Dodgers in the ninth inning cough up a 3-run homer to Rafael Marchand as a guy named Blake Trainin comes in and coughs up the 3-run dinger. 9-6 Phillies. And the best of thoughts, the most astute of analysis, including like an emotional line in there about the Dodgers and their incentive. We end up on the losing end of this thing. So I would imagine Tommy Lasorda, Vince Scully rolling over in their graves. Tommy, of course, was bleeding Dodger blue. He probably felt like a hemophiliac in heaven. So this game ended up in a loss column. Fortunately for the Dodgers and their backers and their fans, they retained their 2-game lead over the San Diego Padres with 2 weeks to go in the regular season, maybe even a little less than 2 weeks. And so they're still in a favorable position there to get the bye in the first round. But to take that loss on the chin, when a guy throws a no-hitter through 5, only to be lifted, and have your team cough up 6 runs in the ensuing frame, come back from the dead in this case, get back into a tie situation, go into the ninth inning with the home field, and you end up losing. That's why they call it gambling and not winning. So that was a real tough beat. We apologize for giving that out as our game yesterday. We'll try and do better as we look at things that are coming up. And, of course, we're going to zero in a little bit on college and professional football. A couple of lines there really stand out to me. Now, the Thursday night game involves our local team here. The show originates out of South Florida, not Miami, but Fort Lauderdale area. And yet it's all seemingly one and the same. To people around the country, you would perceive this to be Miami. And the Miami Dolphins have been awful so far. There have been, and I don't know if any of you people out there were responsible for this plane flying over Hard Rock Stadium last week when the Dolphins blew a game to the Patriots after getting hammered early in the ball game. And this has been the disturbing thing. Many people nationally are calling for the head of Mike McDaniel, saying he's not qualified to be a coach. My beef with him, I mean, this whole intellectual approach, this sort of pseudo-intellectualism that we get from him, he's starting to speak in tongues, though, a little bit. And if you're going to be a coach that's going to try and institute some kind of discipline and a little more sort of feeling of urgency from your players, you can't look like a douchebag. And that's essentially it. Now, I grew up at a time, we didn't wear short pants when I was growing up in the 50s in Brooklyn. It was considered, how do we put this delicately? I know it's no filter, so we can say whatever we want, but the cancel culture are just like a bunch of vultures. Everything you say now on social media or on the internet gets blasted way out of proportion. But let's say when I was a kid growing up in Brooklyn, if you were wearing shorts, which few people did, because it was considered less than manly. Now, there was another purpose to that. If anybody is from that era of time and grew up in New York City, we didn't wear shorts because every day we played some hybrid version of baseball. It was either stickball or punch ball and some kind of hybrid version of the game. Stoop ball was another hybrid version, but it didn't require sliding. And another test of your manhood was, would you slide? And your dedication to the team and whether or not you really were a team player. Would you be willing to slide on cement or pavement? And most people did. So it became prohibitive. You just didn't want to get that road rash. You got it anyway, even through a pair of jeans. But yeah, you couldn't wear shorts and go out there and play ball in the streets because you would do these feet first lube rock slides into one of the bases, second, third, or home, to avoid being tagged out. And you had to do it on cement. So there were a lot of reasons why nobody ever wore shorts there. So, and I don't know if that tainted me for life about it. I remember clam diggers became sort of popular, and you really had to have some balls to go out there and be the first guy to exhibit that. And so, yeah, I mean, it might have tainted my opinion about the fashion, which I don't even know what they call these things that Mike McDaniel is wearing, but it's not a good look. I mean, coach, get the some soiled pair of coach's shorts that the former Dolphin mascot Dolphin Denny used to wear, and put those on. I think they're in a cabinet somewhere at the Dolphins training facility to commemorate what was the longtime and maybe the lamest mascot. The guy was a good guy personally, but the lamest mascot in the history of all sports. What was the Dolphins being represented by Dolphin Denny, a guy who had like a Karl Malden nose, a bulbous nose, looked like he'd been drinking all day. And his big claim to fame was he had these orange coach's shorts and a sequin sombrero. Hardly what you consider an inspiring sideline presence. And most of the players really couldn't stand some of the stuff that he did. So it was ugly. But short of just going and taking a sledgehammer to the cabinet where these coaches' shorts are commemorating Dolphin Denny, Mike McDaniel, just put a pair of pants on. Look like a coach. I don't know that he's going to inspire this team to respond to what they need to do. And that is quickly reverse a trend that has them at 0-2 with everybody calling for the coach's head. Planes are flying over the stadium. I always get a kick out of that. I don't know that that's ever led to the removal of anybody from their job, but they have those banner planes flying over Hard Rock Stadium now, or they did last week. And I think that's the first time we've seen this level of revolution on the part of the fans. And so they face the daunting task of going tomorrow night into Buffalo, where Buffalo is scoring points like there's no tomorrow. They are shredding teams. They beat the Jets 30-10 last week, and they put up 41 in their game against the Baltimore Ravens in week number 1. So they're 2-0. Josh Allen has looked great. The criticism of Josh Allen was that he was somewhat erratic, too much of a daredevil out there, was taking a lot of chances, would make these throws blindly into double coverage and get them picked off at crucial times in the ball game. Brilliant, of course, with his ability to rumble around there and run and accomplish things on offense just by running the football. Extremely tough. Would take a hit and then bounce off that, spin out of a tackle, get those extra yards that he would need. We've seen him do it on many occasions. But I don't know that we've seen Josh Allen throw the ball with pinpoint accuracy like we have the last couple of weeks. And he's been great. Now, he is going to be, and this came out yesterday, he's got some kind of problem. I don't know if he broke his nose or there's some kind of sensitivity there, but he will be, for the first time in his pro career. He did mention that he did this occasionally when he was in college. He's going to be wearing one of those plastic visors in front of his eyes and to protect his face in this game against the Dolphins. So you would think for a quarterback that's somewhat like putting blinkers on. It always amazes me that tennis players don't wear sunglasses more often. You rarely see a tennis player wearing sunglasses, even though you guys know what it's like if you play any tennis. You're out there at noon, 1 o'clock, and you're looking straight up into the sun as you serve. You can't even find a ball with a search warrant. So you don't want to have your vision compromised. I would imagine that's why tennis players shun wearing sunglasses because it affects them or might impact them on other shots that they don't get as clear of a view of. So I mean, this is the one compromising thing that might factor in. I don't know how much a part of your equation you want to make it in trying to handicap this ball game, but I'm gonna think it's going to be relatively insignificant because if you were just looking at straight up on the money line, and you would have to lay a significant price, the line is 12.5, favoring the Buffalo Bills in this game. If you're straight up on the money line, you're thinking that they could put a blindfold on Josh Allen and give him the last drag of a cigarette. Speaking of the Carol Chessman story. And he could be facing a firing squad, and he still would be able to beat the Miami Dolphins. They have not been able to put the kind of pressure on quarterbacks that you would have thought, and they've been giving up a lot of points. They got torched by Daniel Jones in week 1 against the Indianapolis Colts. Now people are thinking the Colts are for real, and we'll get to that in just a sec. And then beyond that, they give up, 37 last week to the New England Patriots, albeit 7 of those points coming on a kick return. But defense has been less than significant for the Miami Dolphins so far. We knew their secondary was going to be weak. Thought maybe up front, their front seven would be strong, but often injured, and they really haven't measured up. And beyond that, they're coming out of these games flatter than a Parisian runway model, coming into them anyway, which is another reflection on coaching because they don't seem prepared for the outset of the game. They gave up 2 quick touchdowns to the Patriots. They're only up 12-0 as of 2 missed extra points. But that's a reflection on coaching and the ability to instill some kind of professional pride in what these guys are going to do when you're getting hammered right at the outset of ball games. They were down 20-0 at halftime to the Indianapolis Colts on the road in week number 1 when you thought, all right, let's see what this team has. Maybe they're not as bad as a lot of people were making them out to be before the season got underway. And they have all this high-priced talent on offense, and there's still a lot of question marks about Tua. Tyreek Hill was more of a presence and a factor in the offense last week. They weren't just using him on a ton of short routes. And Jalen Waddle emerged after being in witness protection in week number 1. So the question is, can the Dolphins be within 12.5 of the Buffalo Bills with a possibly slightly compromised Josh Allen throwing a rock and what you would have to think is a genuine air of desperation on the part of Mike McDaniel to show that he can motivate a team to come at the outset of a ball game and actually bring a little bit of a spark, bring some kind of fire, and show that they have the competitive desire to beat and or at least run with a division rival. 12.5 is a lot of points to lay in any NFL game. Record notwithstanding, you can use the litmus test of, hey, what have we seen out there so far? The Dolphins, along with the Broncos, seem to make the Colts look like Daniel Jones, what was a huge acquisition, and that they're going to be a very good team this year. People are saying that they are the best in their division by far, some handicappers. I'm not sure I go along with that just yet because you can always see, and a leopard can't change its spots. They often say that. When does Daniel Jones revert back to being the Daniel Jones that we saw that absolutely stunk the joint out with the New York Giants? Or is he benefiting so much from the change of atmosphere that he actually was? I thought he was going to be an okay quarterback in the National Football League, but that was far from the case here before he got his chance now to start for the Indianapolis Colts. So Dolphins and the Bills, it was always a big rivalry. They don't have quite the luster on the Miami Dolphins side of things that they had in the past when Danny Boy was chucking a rock, and these games always turned out to be classic. Bills have been effective against the Dolphins, but we've seen the Dolphins in spots be competitive, even with the guys they have on offense right now. 12.5 points is a lot to lay. My first inclination there, although I really need to put some more thought into this, because I could just as easily see the Dolphins getting hammered as being competitive in this game. But I'm thinking no matter what, double digits, National Football League, unless you're talking about the Saints, I'm going to go ahead and take the points in that game and hope the Dolphins show enough of, I hate to use this phrase, sense of urgency, that they actually go out there and make a representative showing. They're probably going to lose. I would say it's more like a 10-point game, but we shall see. So first inclination there is to go ahead and take the 12.5 points with the Miami Dolphins. That's been showing pretty steadily since this line came out. Colts in their game against the Titans are favored by 3.5 on the road. Tennessee, of course, has Cam Ward throwing a rock. We're very familiar with him from his days at the University of Miami. Hasn't looked great. He made a couple of plays that were Cam Ward-esque, throwing a ball across the field and scoring a touchdown for his first professional touchdown pass. He's also shown the same inclinations that he did when he was at the University of Miami. And while it might have worked against Rutgers or FAMU, it doesn't necessarily work in the pros to kind of approach this with some real reckless abandon. But are the Colts that good? They're on the road laying 3.5. Does Daniel Jones come back to the pack, or is he going to demonstrate for a third week in a row that the Giants made a humongous mistake, possibly in letting this guy go, that they gave up on him too soon, that he wasn't the problem, that it was the offensive line all along? And while the Giants did put a lot of points on the board and Russell Wilson had a tremendous game, I still get a kick out of it. I can still see the back page of my New York Post where after throwing that interception that led to the Dallas Cowboys' victory in overtime, and he had put up over 400 passing yards, so it looked like the Russell Wilson, looked like he had turned the clock back 10 years. The headline was Dark Side of the Moon Ball. where he'd had such success throughout almost the entirety of the ballgame until he finally blundered, just put one up there for grabs as if it was a Hail Mary pass and threw it to the wrong side of where the receiver was breaking. It got picked off, and that led to the winning score for the Dallas Cowboys. The offensive line was a big factor. That they managed to hold up for the Giants in this game last week, but Daniel Jones was victimized by that. We know that. Is he okay now with the Indianapolis Colts? Would you be willing to lay 3.5 with the Colts to go 3-0 against the Tennessee Titan team that also finds itself in a typical predicament where they've started the season out in lousy fashion and really haven't demonstrated too much? But going on the road there, that's one to watch. We'll try and get a deeper opinion on that. A couple of games though that really are curious. I'm thinking, are the Bears awful? They're at home. They're only laying. They're actually favored by a point over the Cowboys. The Cowboys' defense is suspect, but as Caleb Williams, they just got hammered 52-21 by the Detroit Lions, who had lost on the opening week in convincing fashion to the Green Bay Packers. I'm not sure I want to lay 1 point with the Chicago Bears against anybody at this stage. So I'm looking at that game. I'm thinking the Dallas Cowboys getting a point on the road against the Chicago Bears might be a good play. And then our other theory so far from the first 2 weeks of the NFL regular season is that I will bet any spread pretty much against the New Orleans Saints until they prove us wrong. And so the Commanders are only laying. Oh, Seahawks are laying 7.5 and they're at home against the New Orleans Saints. Seahawks coming off a win. Sam Darnold now the quarterback there after the big year that he had in Minnesota. So he demonstrated that at times, at least, he can be a very competent NFL quarterback. He did come back to the pack the last few games, and ultimately they decided, the Vikings, which may turn out to be one of the most hideous mistakes, that they were better off with J.J. McCarthy, who looks like he's awful. And might give you an inclination to bet against the Vikings in every game against the spread until further notice. So I'm going to bet against the Saints this week. I like the Seahawks even laying 7.5. The Commanders laying only 3.5 at home to the Raiders. Seems like a pretty good play. I know this is very chalky, but we are taking the 1 point in that Bears game against the Cowboys. And the Vikings and the Bengals. The Bengals will be without Joe Burrow for the next 3 months and possibly for the entire season. Jake Browning came in and gave a pretty good account of himself. The Bengals, we know, have offensive firepower. It seems like a lot of quarterbacks could prosper, having the wide receiver core that the Cincinnati Bengals have. Their defense is not great by any stretch of the imagination, but how can you possibly have any faith, even at home, in J.J. McCarthy after watching that game last week? 7 out of his 8 quarters have been abysmal at best. Not even, I don't even think abysmal is a strong enough word. So in looking at that ball game, my temptation there, in spite of the fact they're going with a backup quarterback, and we've seen this happen many, many times where the backup comes in relief of a guy who gets injured, in this case Browning for Joe Burrow, and you thought they were dead in the water against the Jaguars last week, and then looks good, and you're thinking, okay, it's not going to be as bad as we think, and then comes back and just absolutely craps out the following week, rolls a 7 right from the start, and you end up looking like a fool because you believe that this guy, and there's a reason that he's a backup, what would be the thing that would pop to mind. But I'm going to go against the Vikings in that game and take the 3 points with the Bengals. So we have a few games that we're looking at here. Bengals getting 3 against the Vikings. This is all preliminary stuff. The Commanders only laying 3.5 against the Raiders, who didn't impress me at all this past week in their effort against the Chargers. The Seahawks laying any amount of points against the Saints. And going against the Bears, laying 1 point against the Cowboys. Those are our thoughts there. And then we do have a big game in town. I'm actually going to attend it. It's been a while since I've been to a University of Miami game. Was involved in their broadcast for many, many, many years, probably over 35 years. So I have an attachment to the program. There is no more bitter rivalry for the Miami Hurricanes and vice versa than their game against the Florida Gators. The Gators might dismiss that and say, you're not our biggest rival. But it's a local thing. There's a lot on the line here. The recruiting base here in South Florida is such that many of these guys, they always talk about, have played against each other since high school. And there's a little bit more involved than would meet the eye in just your standard numerical analysis. So the Hurricanes, who looked really, really good against South Florida. We were dead wrong about that game. I mean, the only time we were more wrong was when we agreed with the professor that he was making a very solid play with Washington State going against North Texas, and they lose 59-3. That begs the old question: would you rather lose by a point in a heartbreaker, or just get clobbered and be out of it right from the start? I think I'd rather get my at least entertainment quotient out of whatever money I was burning and throwing into the fire. So I would rather lose a close one than get just annihilated like that. And as any kind of public handicapper where you're recommending people that make certain wagers based on the logic that you've thrown out there, total embarrassment on that one. And we were wrong, dead wrong about South Florida being within 17 and a half of Miami. So that was impressive. The Gators have lost their last two ball games. A shocker against South Florida, who beat them in the swamp the previous week. And then no disgrace in losing to LSU on the road. Gators really running the gauntlet. They're like one of those, that fat tuba player for the FAMU band that had to go through the bus while everybody was paddling them. Running the gauntlet of very difficult games. But I'm thinking they kind of gear it up a little bit for this one. Surprised to see that the line moved from like 9.5 in favor of the Hurricanes to 7.5. That seems sort of prohibitive, in spite of the Cristobal factor, which we think is worth 3 points. The blunderous nation of notion of and manner in which Mario Cristobal coaches his team on game day. I don't know that Billy Napier is any better, and he's on the Ed Ogeron hot seat. I'm thinking this line's a little short. And so my first inclination on that ball game is to go ahead. I believe the Canes should be a 10-point favorite in this game. So 7.5 looks a little short to me. I don't know if some bull gator came in here from Gainesville and laid down a ton of money at the Hard Rock or on an app somewhere, but that line looks a little short. I know because of the emotional aspect of it and the rivalry aspect, you would expect it to be more competitive. Gators defensively can put some more pressure on Carson Beck, but he's now the leading candidate for the Heisman Trophy at 8-1. I think unless Mario really fucks this game up, the Hurricanes at home should prevail by more than the 7.5. I have them being more than a touchdown favorite. I would think 10 points probably would be the appropriate line. It was somewhat suspect at 9.5. At 7.5, I don't know that I'm all in, but a big time lean for the Miami Hurricanes in that game. So that's a little peripheral view of what's coming up in football over the weekend. Mike Jones will be with us tomorrow. We'll get more deeply into it. Sorry about losing, but I think we have to make an adjustment in our philosophies here and our approach betting baseball. And this was something I never thought I would find myself advising people to do, but you have to just consider betting the first 5 innings in these games because of the way the pitching matchups go and the reliance on bullpens. Look what happened in this Yankee game yesterday. They're up 10-1. Bullpen comes in. All of a sudden, it's 10-9, and you're sitting there on the edge of your seat. Same thing happened with the Marlins. They're playing the Rockies. They're up 6-0. They end up winning 6-5. There's a lot of this going around. So very suspect as you get into these bullpens in the late going of ball games, especially when it involves middle relief. So that might be a lesson that we learned. We got spanked right in the face there with the Ohtani no-hitter through 5 and end up losing the ball game. A disaster yesterday, and we apologize for going the other way on that in terms of helping you. Bury Your Bookie. All right, we'll have Mike with us tomorrow. The professor on Friday. We'll get into a bunch of college and pro football with Mike. And, of course, the professor, our college football expert, in spite of that disaster of Washington State pick. Only getting 5.5 points, and we needed, 56.5. So we were a little off on that one. But we'll try and make amends. Thanks, people, for tuning in. I'm Jeff DeForest. We'll see you on the next edition tomorrow of Bury Your Bookie.